Lisa had always been the kind of person who minded her own business. She worked as a nurse at the local hospital, pulling long 12-hour shifts that left her exhausted but satisfied. Her small house on Oakwood Drive was her sanctuary, a place where she could finally relax after dealing with difficult patients and demanding doctors all day long. The neighborhood was pretty quiet most of the time. Sure, there were the usual issues that come with living in a planned community. The homeowners association had rules about everything from lawn height to mailbox colors. But Lisa had never had any real problems. She kept her grass cut, painted her fence the approved shade of beige, and generally stayed out of everyone's way. Her driveway wasn't huge, but it was perfect for her needs. Just wide enough for her little blue car and maybe a friend's vehicle if someone came to visit. She'd bought the house 3 years ago specifically because she loved having her own private parking space. No more circling the block looking for street parking like she had to do at her old apartment. On this particular Tuesday morning in late September, Lisa was driving home after one of the most exhausting nights she'd had in months. They'd been short-staffed at the hospital, and she'd barely had time for a coffee break. All she wanted was to get home, take a hot shower, and sleep for at least 8 hours straight. The morning was crisp and clear, with just a hint of fall in the air. The trees along her street were starting to turn yellow and orange. It was the kind of beautiful morning that usually made her feel grateful for living in such a nice area. She turned the corner onto Oakwood Drive, already thinking about how good her bed was going to feel. But as she approached her house, something was very wrong. There was a massive orange and white moving truck sitting right in the middle of her driveway, not partially blocking it, completely filling the entire space from one side to the other. The truck was so big that its rear end was almost touching her garage door, while the front stuck out into the street. Lisa sat in her car for a moment, staring at the scene in disbelief. She rubbed her tired eyes, thinking maybe she was seeing things after working all night. But no, the truck was definitely there, and it was definitely in her driveway. She had to park on the street, something she hadn't done since moving into the house. As she got out of her car, she noticed several neighbors peeking out their windows, obviously curious about the situation. The truck was so large it was hard to miss. Walking around the vehicle, Lisa looked for any clues about who might have put it there. There was no note on her door, no message tucked under her windshield wipers. The truck itself had rental paperwork, visible through the windshield, but she couldn't make out the details from where she stood. She tried to think of logical explanations. Maybe there had been some kind of emergency with one of her neighbors. Maybe someone's moving truck had broken down and they needed a place to leave it temporarily. Maybe it was some kind of mistake by the rental company. But deep down, she had a sinking feeling about who might be responsible. The rental agreement tucked behind the truck's windshield wiper had a name on it that made her heart sink. Mrs. Henderson. Everyone in the neighborhood knew Mrs. Henderson. She was the president of the homeowners association and had a reputation for being, well, difficult. Mrs. Henderson lived just 3 houses down in a big 2-story house with perfectly trimmed hedges and a small sign by her front door that said, HOA President, in gold letters. She was the kind of person who walked around the neighborhood with a clipboard, looking for violations of community rules. Lisa had dealt with Mrs. Henderson twice before. The first time was about her garden fence, which Mrs. Henderson claimed was 2 inches too tall according to the HOA guidelines. The second time was about the color of trim around her front door, which was apparently the wrong shade of white. Both times, Lisa had politely made the requested changes to avoid any drama. She wasn't the type of person who enjoyed conflict, especially with neighbors she had to see regularly. But this was different. This wasn't about fence height or paint colors. This was about someone parking a massive truck on her private property without even asking permission. Standing there in the morning sunlight, still wearing her scrubs from the hospital, Lisa felt a mix of emotions. She was tired, confused, and starting to get angry. The truck wasn't just inconvenient. It was blocking her access to her own garage. She couldn't get her car into her own driveway. She walked closer to examine the truck more carefully. It was one of those big rental moving trucks, the kind people use when they're relocating to a new city. The back doors were closed and locked, but she could hear things shifting around inside when the wind rocked the vehicle slightly. A few more neighbors had come outside now, pretending to check their mail or water their plants while, obviously, watching the drama unfold. Mrs. Peterson from across the street gave her a sympathetic wave. Old Mr. Johnson from next door shook his head and muttered something she couldn't hear. Lisa realized she was going to have to knock on Mrs. Henderson's door and ask about the truck. She really hoped there was some reasonable explanation. Maybe Mrs. Henderson was helping a family member move and had genuinely made an innocent mistake about where to park the truck. As she walked toward Mrs. Henderson's house, Lisa tried to prepare what she would say. She wanted to be polite, but firm. After all, this was her property they were talking about. Even if there was some emergency or special circumstance, the right thing to do would have been to ask permission first. The morning was getting warmer, and Lisa could feel sweat forming under her uniform. She was exhausted, frustrated, and frankly, a little intimidated by the prospect of confronting the neighborhood's self-appointed rule enforcer. But she knew she couldn't just let this slide. Little did Lisa know that this was just the beginning of what would become the most stressful week of her life, ending with police cars, handcuffs, and a story that would be talked about in the neighborhood for years to come. Lisa took a deep breath as she walked up the perfectly paved walkway to Mrs. Henderson's front door. The woman's house looked like something out of a home and garden magazine. Every flower was in perfect rows, every blade of grass was exactly the same height, and there wasn't a single leaf out of place anywhere. She pressed the doorbell and heard fancy chimes playing some classical tune inside. While she waited, Lisa tried to think positive thoughts. Maybe this was all just some big misunderstanding. Maybe Mrs. Henderson would be just as surprised as she was about the truck. The door opened, and there stood Mrs. Henderson, in a crisp, white shirt and dark pants, looking like she was ready for a business meeting, even though it was barely 8 in the morning. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and she had that look on her face that Lisa had seen before, like she was already annoyed before the conversation even started. "Oh, Lisa," Mrs. Henderson said, not sounding particularly happy to see her. "What can I do for you?" Lisa tried to keep her voice friendly and calm. "Hi, Mrs. Henderson, I just got home from work and there's a big moving truck in my driveway. I think there might be some kind of mistake." Mrs. Henderson didn't even look surprised. In fact, she stepped out onto her porch and closed the door behind her like she had been expecting this conversation. "Oh, that truck," she said, waving her hand like it was no big deal. "I put it there myself. You weren't using your driveway anyway." Lisa felt like someone had just slapped her. She actually took a step back, not sure if she had heard correctly. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" Mrs. Henderson crossed her arms and looked at Lisa like she was explaining something to a small child. "I said I put the truck there. I've been watching your house for months now, Lisa. Half the time you park on the street instead of in your driveway. Sometimes your driveway sits empty for days at a time." Lisa couldn't believe what she was hearing. This woman had been watching her house, keeping track of when she parked where. "I park on the street sometimes because I get home late and don't want to wake the neighbors with my garage door," Lisa explained, trying to keep her voice steady. "But it's still my driveway. It's on my property." Mrs. Henderson shook her head, like Lisa just didn't understand how things worked. "This is a community, Lisa. We all have to do our part for the greater good. I needed somewhere to keep the moving truck while I organize all the donations for our big community garage sale next weekend. But you can't just use someone else's driveway without asking," Lisa said, feeling her tiredness turning into frustration. "What if I needed to use it?" "Well, you obviously don't need it very much," Mrs. Henderson replied. "Like I said, I've been paying attention. You park on the street all the time anyway. I figured you wouldn't mind helping out the community for once." Lisa felt her mouth drop open. This woman was actually acting like she was doing Lisa some kind of favor by blocking her driveway with a massive truck. "Mrs. Henderson, I need you to move that truck. Today. Right now, actually." Mrs. Henderson's expression got even more stern. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Lisa. This garage sale is important for everyone in the neighborhood. We're raising money for new playground equipment at the community park. Don't you care about making our neighborhood better?" Lisa couldn't believe this was happening. "Of course I care about the neighborhood, but that doesn't mean you can just take over my driveway. There are rules about this kind of thing." There are laws. Laws? Mrs. Henderson actually laughed. Lisa, I am the president of this homeowners association. I know exactly what the rules are around here. And one of those rules is that we all need to contribute to community projects. Your driveway can contribute by holding our truck for a few days. That's not how property ownership works, Lisa said, her voice getting a little louder, despite her efforts to stay calm. I own that driveway. I pay taxes on it. You can't just decide to use it because you think I'm not using it enough. Mrs. Henderson stepped closer, and Lisa could smell her strong perfume. Let me explain something to you, young lady. This neighborhood has standards. We have rules. We have expectations. And one of those expectations is that residents cooperate with community improvement projects. By giving up their private property? By being flexible and thinking about others instead of just themselves, Mrs. Henderson shot back. The truck will be there for exactly 1 week. You can park on the street just like you usually do anyway. It's not going to hurt you. Lisa felt like she was in some kind of alternate reality. Here was this woman, standing on her own porch, calmly explaining why she had the right to block someone else's driveway with a moving truck. Mrs. Henderson, I'm asking you nicely to move that truck. I'm tired. I just worked all night at the hospital and I just want to be able to park in my own driveway. And I'm telling you that the truck stays where it is, Mrs. Henderson replied, her voice getting sharper. This garage sale is happening next Sunday and I need that truck to store donations until then. Your inconvenience for 1 week is a small price to pay for community improvement. My inconvenience. Lisa couldn't believe what she was hearing. You blocked my driveway without asking permission. You're trespassing on my property. Mrs. Henderson actually rolled her eyes. Oh, please, don't be so dramatic. It's just a driveway and you're barely using it anyway. Besides, as HOA president, I have certain authorities when it comes to community projects. What authorities? Show me in the HOA rules where it says you can block someone's driveway. I don't have to show you anything, Mrs. Henderson said, turning toward her door. The truck stays until Sunday evening and that's final. If you don't like it, you can file a complaint with the HOA board. You are the HOA board, Lisa called out as Mrs. Henderson opened her front door. Exactly, Mrs. Henderson said with a smile that made Lisa's blood boil. So I guess you're out of luck. The truck stays put until I'm ready to move it. Have a nice day, Lisa. And with that, she stepped inside and closed the door, leaving Lisa standing on the porch, staring at the door in complete shock. Lisa walked back to her house in a daze, looking at the massive truck still sitting in her driveway like it owned the place. Several neighbors were still watching from their windows, but no one came out to talk to her. She realized this was going to be a much bigger problem than she had thought. By Thursday morning, Lisa was ready to lose her mind. The giant orange truck had been sitting in her driveway for 3 whole days, and Mrs. Henderson acted like it was the most normal thing in the world. Every time Lisa came home from her shifts at the hospital, there it was, blocking her access to her own garage like some kind of massive orange monster. The worst part wasn't just the inconvenience, though. That was bad enough. Lisa had to park 2 blocks away, because all the close street parking was taken by other neighbors. After working 12-hour shifts on her feet, the last thing she wanted was to carry her heavy work bag and groceries down the street in the dark. But what really got to her was how Mrs. Henderson seemed to be enjoying the whole situation. On Wednesday afternoon, Lisa had spotted her walking around the truck with a clipboard, actually checking on it like it was her personal storage unit. She even saw Mrs. Henderson unlock the back doors and move some boxes around inside. Lisa had tried to handle this the right way. She really had. On Tuesday afternoon, she called the HOA management company that handled the neighborhood's business. The woman on the phone was polite but not very helpful. Well, Mrs. Henderson is the president of your association, the woman had explained. She has quite a bit of authority when it comes to community projects and resource allocation. Resource allocation? Lisa had asked. It's my driveway on my property. I understand your frustration, but these community disputes are really best handled between neighbors. Have you tried talking to Mrs. Henderson directly? Lisa wanted to laugh. Yes, I've talked to her. She told me the truck stays there for a week whether I like it or not. Well, if you'd like to file a formal complaint, I can send you the paperwork. But I should warn you, these things can take several weeks to resolve. Several weeks. Lisa had hung up the phone feeling even more frustrated than before. Next, she tried calling the police. The officer who answered was nice enough, but he didn't have good news either. Ma'am, this sounds like a civil matter between you and your neighbor. Unless there's been a crime committed or someone's in danger, it's not really something we can help with. But she's trespassing on my property, Lisa had argued. I understand, but you'd need to take that up with a lawyer or maybe small claims court. We can't just go around moving people's trucks because of neighbor disputes. A lawyer, small claims court. Lisa made barely enough money to cover her bills, and now she was supposed to hire a lawyer because her neighbor decided to park a truck in her driveway. By Wednesday night, Lisa was exhausted and angry. She sat in her living room looking out at the truck through her front window, trying to figure out what to do next. That's when she decided to start documenting everything. She went outside with her phone and took pictures of the truck from every angle. She photographed the rental agreement that was still tucked behind the windshield wiper. She even took pictures of her property deed and the survey that clearly showed where her driveway boundaries were. While she was outside taking pictures, her neighbor, Mrs. Garcia, came over from across the street. "This is ridiculous," Mrs. Garcia said, shaking her head at the truck. "I can't believe she just parked that thing in your driveway without asking." "You saw her put it there?" Lisa asked. "Oh yes, I was watering my plants Tuesday morning when she drove up with it. I thought maybe you had asked her to help you with something, but then I saw you come home and have to park on the street, and I realized what was really happening." Mrs. Garcia lowered her voice and looked around like she was afraid someone might be listening. "Between you and me, Mrs. Henderson has been getting worse and worse over the past year. She thinks being HOA president means she can do whatever she wants." "What do you mean?" "Well, last month she told the Johnsons they couldn't plant roses in their front yard because they weren't on the approved plant list. Roses. Can you believe that? And she made the new family on Elm Street repaint their mailbox because it was supposedly the wrong shade of blue." Lisa felt a little better knowing she wasn't the only one who had problems with Mrs. Henderson, but it didn't solve her immediate situation. "The thing is," Mrs. Garcia continued, "most people just give in to her because it's easier than fighting. But what she's doing to you is different. This is your property we're talking about." That night, Lisa couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about what Mrs. Garcia had said. Maybe the reason Mrs. Henderson kept getting away with this kind of behavior was because people were afraid to stand up to her. Thursday morning brought a new level of frustration. Lisa was getting ready for work when she heard voices outside. She looked out her bedroom window and saw Mrs. Henderson in her driveway again. But this time she wasn't alone. She had brought 2 other women with her, and they were all standing around the truck talking and pointing at things. Lisa threw on some clothes and went outside. "Excuse me," she called out. "What are you doing in my driveway?" Mrs. Henderson turned around with that same fake smile she always wore. "Oh, good morning, Lisa. I was just showing Mrs. Patterson and Mrs. Chen how we're organizing the garage sale donations. They're on the committee with me." "In my driveway," Lisa said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Well, yes. The truck is very convenient for sorting things," Mrs. Henderson replied like this was perfectly normal. Lisa looked at the other 2 women, hoping they might see how wrong this was, but they just looked uncomfortable and avoided making eye contact. "This needs to stop," Lisa said. "Today, right now." Mrs. Henderson's smile disappeared. "Lisa, I've already explained this to you. The garage sale is this weekend. The truck stays where it is until Sunday evening. End of discussion." "We'll see about that," Lisa said, and went back inside to get ready for work. But as she was leaving for the hospital, she noticed something that made her blood boil. Mrs. Henderson had moved her own car and parked it right next to the truck, taking up even more of Lisa's driveway space. This was war. Friday night, Lisa barely slept. She kept thinking about Mrs. Henderson's car now parked in her driveway alongside that massive truck. It was like the woman was marking her territory, showing the whole neighborhood that she could do whatever she wanted and nobody could stop her. Saturday morning started like any other day, but it quickly turned into something Lisa would never forget. She was in her kitchen making coffee when she heard voices outside. Not just talking voices, but the sound of people working, moving things around, making noise. Lisa looked out her window and couldn't believe what she saw. Mrs. Henderson was in her driveway again, but this time she was actually inside the moving truck. She had opened the back doors wide and was climbing around inside, moving boxes and sorting through items like she owned the place. Lisa threw on her robe and rushed outside. "What are you doing?" she called out. Mrs. Henderson poked her head out of the truck, not looking embarrassed at all. "Oh, good morning, Lisa. I'm just reorganizing all the garage sale donations. We got so many items yesterday that everything got mixed up. I need to sort them by category to make the sale run more smoothly tomorrow." "You're inside a truck that's parked illegally on my property," Lisa said, her voice shaking with anger. Mrs. Henderson climbed down from the truck slowly, brushing dust off her clothes. "Lisa, you really need to think about the bigger picture. Here, this garage sale is going to raise money for new playground equipment. Don't you care about the children in our neighborhood?" Lisa almost laughed at how ridiculous this was getting. "Of course I care about children, but that doesn't give you the right to take over my driveway." "I'm not taking over anything," Mrs. Henderson said, crossing her arms. "I'm using community resources for a community project. Your driveway was sitting empty anyway." That's when Lisa realized she needed to start recording everything. She pulled out her phone and hit the record button. "Mrs. Henderson, I'm asking you one final time to remove this truck from my private property. Will you do that?" Mrs. Henderson looked right at the camera with no shame at all. "No, I will not. This truck stays right here until Sunday evening, when our garage sale is finished. Your driveway can finally serve the community instead of just sitting there being wasted." Lisa couldn't believe Mrs. Henderson had just said all of that on camera. She was actually admitting to trespassing and refusing to stop. "So you're saying you won't move the truck, even though it's on my private property, and I'm asking you to remove it?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Mrs. Henderson replied with a smug smile. "Deal with it." Lisa stopped recording and went back inside, her hands shaking with anger and frustration. She had it all on video now. Mrs. Henderson admitting she put the truck there, admitting she wouldn't move it, and being completely rude about the whole thing. But the day was far from over. Around 2 in the afternoon, Lisa decided to run to the grocery store. When she came back an hour later, she couldn't believe what she saw. Mrs. Henderson had done something that made Lisa realize this woman had completely lost her mind. Not only was the truck still there, and not only was Mrs. Henderson's car still parked behind it, but now there was a third vehicle in her driveway. Mrs. Henderson had somehow gotten her hands on a small trailer and hooked it up to her car. The entire driveway was now completely blocked by 3 different vehicles. Lisa sat in her car on the street, staring at her own driveway that she couldn't even access anymore. She felt tears of frustration starting to form in her eyes. This was beyond unreasonable. This was harassment. She grabbed her phone and called the police again. This time she was ready with everything she needed. "I need to report someone trespassing on my property and refusing to leave," she told the operator. "What's the nature of the trespassing, ma'am?" "My neighbor has parked 3 vehicles in my driveway without permission and refuses to move them. I have video evidence of her admitting she won't move them. We'll send an officer out to take a look." 20 minutes later, Officer Rodriguez arrived. He was a middle-aged man who looked like he'd seen every kind of neighbor dispute possible. Lisa met him on the sidewalk and explained the whole situation from the beginning. "So this has been going on for how long?" he asked. 5 days now. It started Tuesday morning." Officer Rodriguez walked over to examine the vehicles. He took pictures with his own camera and looked at the rental agreement still visible in the truck's windshield. "And you have video of her admitting she won't move the truck?" "Yes, from this morning." Lisa showed him the recording on her phone. Officer Rodriguez watched the whole thing, shaking his head. "Ma'am, this is pretty clear cut. She's trespassing on your property, and she's admitted it on camera. So you can make her move the vehicles?" "I'm going to go talk to her first, give her a chance to resolve this voluntarily. But if she refuses, then yes, we'll have to take further action." Lisa felt a spark of hope for the first time all week. Officer Rodriguez walked down to Mrs. Henderson's house and knocked on the door. Lisa could see them talking on the porch, but she couldn't hear what was being said. The conversation went on for about 10 minutes, and Lisa could tell from Mrs. Henderson's body language that she was getting upset. Finally, Officer Rodriguez walked back over to Lisa. "Well, I gave her the opportunity to move the vehicles voluntarily, but she refused. She told me that as HOA president, she has the authority to use community resources for community projects." "And what did you tell her?" "I explained that being HOA president doesn't give her the right to trespass on private property." She became quite argumentative and told me I don't understand how proper communities work. Lisa felt her heart racing. "So what happens now?" Officer Rodriguez looked back toward Mrs. Henderson's house, where Lisa could see the woman watching them from her window. "Now we do this the hard way." Sunday morning arrived with thick gray clouds and the promise of rain. Lisa woke up early even though she didn't have to work that day. She couldn't help but look out her window at the 3 vehicles still blocking her driveway. The truck, Mrs. Henderson's car, and that trailer were still sitting there like they owned the place. Lisa had spent most of Saturday evening on the phone with Officer Rodriguez, going over what would happen next. He had explained that Mrs. Henderson would be given one final chance to move the vehicles voluntarily before any arrests were made. "Sometimes people come to their senses when they realize we're serious," he had told her. "But if she refuses, again, we'll have to take action." Around 10 in the morning, Lisa noticed activity at Mrs. Henderson's house. Several cars were pulling up and people were carrying boxes and bags toward Lisa's driveway. The garage sale was starting, and Mrs. Henderson was actually planning to use Lisa's blocked driveway as her base of operations. Lisa watched in amazement as Mrs. Henderson directed people to set up tables right there in the driveway, using the truck as a backdrop for their sale. She had string lights hung between the truck and the trailer, and she'd even put up a banner that said, "Community Garage Sale," right across Lisa's driveway entrance. The nerve of this woman was unbelievable. Lisa called Officer Rodriguez. "She's actually holding her garage sale in my driveway right now. There are people everywhere, and she's acting like she owns the place." "I'm on my way," he said. "This ends today." 20 minutes later, not 1 but 3 police cars pulled up on Oakwood Drive. Officer Rodriguez had brought backup, and Lisa could see neighbors starting to come out of their houses to see what was happening. Mrs. Henderson was busy helping customers when the officers approached. Lisa watched from her window as Officer Rodriguez walked up to her. "Ma'am, we spoke yesterday about the vehicles in this driveway. I'm going to need you to move them now." Mrs. Henderson looked annoyed by the interruption. "Officer, as I explained, yesterday I'm conducting a community garage sale. These vehicles are part of our setup for a legitimate neighborhood event." "Ma'am, this is private property, and you don't have permission to be here. The property owner has asked you to leave multiple times." Lisa saw Mrs. Henderson gesture toward her house dismissively. That woman is being completely unreasonable. This garage sale benefits the entire community. She should be supporting us, not causing problems. Officer Rodriguez remained calm but firm. "Regardless of the purpose, you're trespassing on private property. I need you to end this sale and move these vehicles immediately." That's when Mrs. Henderson made the mistake that would change everything. "I absolutely will not," she said, her voice getting louder. "I am the president of this homeowners association, and I have every right to use community resources for community projects. You obviously don't understand how proper neighborhoods work." Lisa could see other neighbors gathering on the sidewalk, watching the scene unfold. Some were taking pictures with their phones. "Ma'am, being HOA president doesn't give you the authority to trespass on someone's private property," Officer Rodriguez explained patiently. "This is ridiculous," Mrs. Henderson snapped. "I've been managing this community for 3 years and I know exactly what my rights are. This garage sale is happening whether that selfish woman likes it or not." Officer Rodriguez looked back at his backup officers and nodded. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for criminal trespassing." Lisa couldn't believe what she was hearing. After a week of frustration and feeling completely powerless, someone was finally holding Mrs. Henderson accountable for her actions. "You can't arrest me," Mrs. Henderson protested as Officer Rodriguez approached with handcuffs. "I'm the HOA president. I'm doing this for the community." "You have the right to remain silent," Officer Rodriguez began, but Mrs. Henderson interrupted him. "This is outrageous. You people don't understand anything about community leadership. I'm trying to raise money for playground equipment and you're treating me like a criminal." As the handcuffs clicked into place, Mrs. Henderson's voice got even louder. "This is harassment. I'm going to file complaints against all of you. The Homeowners Association will hear about this." Lisa watched from her window as Mrs. Henderson was escorted to one of the police cars. The woman was still arguing, still insisting that she had every right to do what she'd been doing. The garage sale customers had scattered as soon as the police arrived, leaving boxes and tables scattered around Lisa's driveway. The other officers began directing the remaining volunteers to pack up their things and move the vehicles. Within an hour, Lisa's driveway was completely clear for the first time in 6 days. The truck was gone, Mrs. Henderson's car was gone, and the trailer was gone. It was like a miracle. Mrs. Garcia came over from across the street with a huge smile on her face. "I can't believe she actually got arrested," she said, shaking her head. "I've been waiting 3 years for someone to stand up to that woman." "I can't believe it either," Lisa replied. "I honestly thought she was going to get away with it." "Well, maybe now she'll think twice before pulling something like this again." Over the next few days, Lisa learned that Mrs. Henderson had been charged with criminal trespassing and disturbing the peace. She had to pay a fine and was sentenced to community service, which Lisa found ironically appropriate. More importantly, the HOA management company had removed Mrs. Henderson from her position as president after reviewing the police report and Lisa's video evidence. The new HOA president was Mrs. Garcia, who immediately sent Lisa a formal apology letter along with a gift card to her favorite restaurant. "We're committed to making sure something like this never happens again," the letter said. Lisa framed the letter and hung it in her garage, right where she could see it every time she pulled into her own driveway. Finally, her home felt like a sanctuary again.